moral typecasting, which is this tendency we kind of instinctively classify people as either the perpetrator or the victims. And so we looked at, okay, might there be a gender bias in our tendency to place men and women in the victim and perpetrator categories? And so across a series of studies, what we found was that we more instinctively classify women as victims and men as perpetrators. When you classify someone as a perpetrator, it makes it more challenging to see them as a victim. And when you classify someone as a victim, it's harder to see them as a perpetrator. And so what we found is that congruent with this typecasting, we found that people more easily blame men than women, and they more easily feel sympathy for women than men. And so you look more pro-social by championing women. We did actually conduct a study. It was a politician talking about men's afflictions in the world. We didn't say what the politician's gender was. It was them giving a speech talking about all the ways that men are suffering in the world. And then in the other condition, we just changed men to women. And so what we found is that so they liked that politician more, perceived them as more moral, even though the statements weren't true. And so I think that this makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, because if we think about reproduction, if you have a group with very few women, you're not going to have many babies being produced compared to if you have a group with a lot of women. You really only need a couple of men to still...
A couple of men having an absolutely fantastic time.
We need rest. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is spongy and bruised.
It's time, snoo. Can't we just cuddle?
This can be really problematic when we might be less likely to recognize men as victims and have less sympathy for their suffering. Also, if we're more inclined to see women in this victim role, it makes it harder for us to see them as agentic. And so I think this might contribute to why we more easily recognize men as leaders. And so it's not always unilaterally positive to see women as victims.